All right, welcome back to Patriot to the Core podcast. This is episode 94, and I've got a guest on here that I've wanted on for a long time. Retired combat controller Ish Villegas, and Ish, I know years ago I think I'd asked you to be on the show, and you weren't real interested, if I'm remembering correctly. But is that what happened several years ago?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, like I was in a funk. Um, I guess you could call it PTSD or whatever, but I really didn't want to talk about things. I didn't want to go public with anything, and just up until recently, is when I decided, you know what, it kind of like I got my confidence back. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I was not ready at the time, and um, I meant to reach out to you, but I'm glad you reached out to me because I feel like it has been time for a little while, but yeah, I wasn't ready at that time.
Okay, I get it. I know in one of your shoot, for sure, two of your teammates that I know have told me in the past, "Hey, I'm not ready yet." Now, one of them, he told me last year, "Is like, hey, I'm ready to do it, but only in person." And
Yeah.
so he was supposed to be here, and it didn't happen. There's that fuel shortage last year, like over a year ago in North Carolina, well, in the East Coast, and so anyway, we'll do it at some point, but probably in person. Of course, I'd prefer in person anyway with all of them.
Yeah.
All right, so you spent, what was it, 19? How many years as a combat controller in the Air Force?
22 years and 9 months.
Okay, all right. And you've got, just to get a little background on you, how many deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq and then other places in the world?
To Afghanistan, I got seven. I did the initial invasion, and then seven more, or seven total. And then to Iraq, I just got the one, the initial invasion. I've also done a trip to South America and Africa as well.
Okay. All right. Very seasoned patriot here. So the only thing I want to talk about maybe as far as your pipeline, because I've had several controllers on, and we've talked about what combat controllers do, and we've talked about the training pipeline. But for you, what was the most challenging part of your training?
The whole thing, honestly. When in high school, I didn't play organized sports. The only type of stuff I did was with my buddies. I don't necessarily call that, working out or anything like that. But yeah, I never worked out. I rode my bike a lot. We grew up pretty poor, so I rode my skateboard, my bike. I walked a lot of places, and then I'd spend some of my summers in Mexico, working, helping out, my family down there. And it involved a lot of climbing mountains and everything. So I was in somewhat shape, but I wasn't in any type of shape for the pipeline whatsoever. And swimming was, I'd say, the hardest part of the process because I really hadn't swam much at all. My the training that I'd done prior to the pipeline, I wouldn't even call it swimming, was just mainly floating. And I actually tried swimming in the lake, and my buddy Eric, who's since passed away, actually saved my life because I was actually drowning, and he held me up until the boat actually came by to pick us up. But other than that, I was learning as I was going. I was 128 pounds, so pretty skinny kid, and I think the only thing I had going for me was I was stubborn, and I didn't quit. And I'm thankful that I was active as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about the swimming? How was that? I imagine, is swimming the hardest for pretty much everybody?
Yeah, swimming is like they call it the great equalizer. Because you have some guys that are really tough. They're just beasts on land, and um, but not a lot of people put a lot of work in the pool, unless you're some sort of uh, what's it called, the water polo
Water
player
polo.
or something like that. You people don't know what they don't know, and people are very uncomfortable holding their breath, and you get a lot of meatheads that come in, and the number one thing that consumes oxygen is all that muscle. So these guys are very strong and very powerful coming in, but everybody is equal in the water.
So there's one story I really would like you to tell, because I just heard it recently on another interview you did, and it was about the swim portion and how you did what it took to complete the task. Will you share that about your shorts?
Yeah, we used to take the pass test, the stamina test, physical ability stamina test in basic training, and everyone who wants to try out can try out. And from my flight, it was just me and two other guys, and I was the only one who passed. But as we were swimming, the pool was the chaparral pool, which is a 50-meter pool. And when we get there, we're basic trainees. We're scared enough as it is already. And these guys dump a 55-gallon trash can full of these shorts, brown shorts with, these white waist ties. And it wasn't like the Ranger panties or anything like that that we wear, but it was just some cheap generic, had a lining in it. Well, most of the shorts were missing the waist ties. So, I was kind of at the very end trying to get to the pile, and guys are already picking out all the good ones. And, I'm with whatever's remaining, and so I picked up a few, and I mean, I got a 27, 28-inch waist, and none of them fit me. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I'm getting yelled at. They're pick something, get in the pool, and I'm like, all right. So I just grabbed the next thing that I put in my hand, and yeah, we went and changed, and I'm struggling the entire time to actually keep my shorts on. So now we're getting in the water, and I actually completed two of the underwaters, kind of squeezing my legs together, trying to hold the shorts together. And you get a little bit of a break before the 500-meter swim. So I'm sitting there trying to tie it in a knot. That's how big these things were. And they kept falling off, so I'm like, now it's time to do the 500-meter swim. And man, I struggled so much for the first lap down and back. And finally, and the cadre are yelling at us on deck, and then finally I was like, screw this. I'm not going to pass unless I do something. So kind of like the underwaters, I decided to just let them drop. And next thing I know, they're around my ankle. And next thing I know, they're gone. Like I completely lost my shorts. So here I am swimming naked, and I can hear the cadre laughing and giggling, and I'm like, screw this. Like I have to do something, And so when I finished, I actually was off by a few seconds. So I failed.
Were you the last guy? You weren't the last guy though, right?
I wasn't the last guy,
Okay.
no. But I ended up failing technically. And one of the cadre, and I wish I knew his name to this day. And I've asked around, and nobody can tell me who this guy was. But I heard him whisper to the guy grading. He says, "Hey man, I saw him struggle with his shorts the entire first lap, 50 meters. He's like, he would have made it. If those shorts would have stayed on. And I ended up passing. I'm thankful to that guy, that controller, that PJ that kind of, went to bat for me.
So are you standing there on the deck with your drawers gone, or what at this time?
Now I was standing in the pool with my drawers gone, and they're yelling at me, and then they finally they're like, go get your drawers, they're making fun of my junk, or whatever. And I swam back in the water, and I was, looking underwater until I found the shorts, and I put them on, and I got out of the pool.
No, that's funny, man. You did what it took to pass. All right, so one of how many that have 2 silver stars in the Air Force ish.
I believe it's just the one of three in the Air Force. So Sean Harvell was the first, and I want to say it's the first for the war on terror. Um, I think there's other guys in history that have received multiple, but for this generation, for my generation, it's Sean Harvell. Then I received two, and there is one of my TAC P counterparts that also received two, and his name escapes me, but one of three.
Wow. Would you say in the Air Force, is it more difficult to get a Silver Star?
Yeah, the three highest awards are the Silver Star, the Air Force Cross, and the Medal of Honor being the highest. They're pretty hard. They have to go up to Congress, and they have to. I don't know how our officers do it, but they have a PowerPoint and a quick mission synopsis, and they have to cover the criteria in order, whatever criteria it is for the Silver Star or the Cross or the Medal of Honor. And a lot of guys have no idea what a combat controller does. So the first things that most people see, even within the Air Force, is like, oh, he's Air Force. What could he possibly have done to warrant such a thing? So there's a lot of politics involved with it. But yeah, I've seen a lot of our guys as combat controllers, they do amazing things out on the battlefield. And it doesn't always get reported, in our after actions reports on exactly what we did, because we're not chasing awards, but it's kind of up to our leadership to interpret those kinds of things. And they battle track everything at the stock, the Special Tactics Operations Center. So, they're the ones who ultimately determine what kind of, I guess, level of awards. But as far as being Air Force, yeah, it's really tough. It is hard because the other services, they're known for combat. You have the Green Berets who do amazing things. You have the SEALs who do amazing things, Force Recon, and so on and so forth. Even infantry, because they're the ones out there doing the shooting and the fighting. And when people don't know what a combat controller is, or that we have these specialties with these kinds of skill set, those guys up in Congress have no idea.
Yeah. Well, your first award came from 2009, right, at Cobra, and FOB Cobra was later named Tinsley. But would you just give some background of Cobra and what kind of crap went down there?
Yeah, Cobra has always been known as a really hostile place. And I think at one point it was the hottest place on earth, meaning that it was the most hostile. And I mean, we lost service there. We've had several Green Berets killed there, several combat controllers wounded there, several SF guys wounded there. And I mean, it is really just a very inhospitable place. We're surrounded by rivers on each side. The Helmand kind of does an H along the valleys, and resupplies in general are hard to get. Just driving back and forth, there's a lot of choke points, and the level of IEDs in that place, improvised explosive devices, is through the roof. And we call it a white space, which is the space that we're actually in control of. Most of it we don't control. It's an enemy territory, and it's almost impossible to maintain control of a lot of this territory. But I mean, it's always been known as a really hostile place to be at. Hence why they called it Cobra. And then later, when I was there, the SF team that I was working with renamed it Tinsley in honor of Captain Tinsley, who was killed about a month and a half to 2 months before I actually arrived.
Okay. When Mark went to Cobra, we didn't know anything about it, but my brother Joseph found that National Geographic show called Inside the Green Berets, and it was something Cobra. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Okay. That was filmed like maybe 07 or 08, seems like something like that. And it was busy then, wasn't it?
It's that place has been a hot spot, since we first arrived there.
Okay. Well, as much as I'd love to get to both of your Silver Star, like the battles, we probably won't, but at least we'll start on the first one. I've got the citation here to accompany your award. There's just a few things I wanted to point out, like you charge 200 feet across an open, uncleared, improvised explosive device minefield to a more effective support by fire position and immediately returned fire with his personal weapon. What personal weapon was it, Fish?
It was my M4 rifle.
M4, okay. And then it says he, while surgically and lethally executing fires on enemy positions using artillery, rotary wing, and fixed wing, close air support. And this, I can't remember. You'll have to correct me, but Joseph, my brother, one of my brothers, was at your Silver Star citation, your award ceremony. It might have been the second one, though. And he remembers when they were reading it, he was sitting close to your mom. And you saw the look on your mom's face because he said she had this look and she was looking at you, and you were just kind of like, yeah. And she was, I imagine it's words like that, where you run in the open, expose yourself, and executing fires. And so is that what happened? Your mom had no clue what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, my mom knew I was coming into, somewhat of a dangerous profession, and she knew I was deployed into Afghanistan. Obviously, there's fighting going on and whatnot, and she knew my job involved having to go to war and doing these kinds of dangerous things. But I've never actually told her anything about what I've done in my career, or at least up to that point. And uh, yeah, so my sister was translating. I believe it was sister translating for her, and I'm sitting there, they're reading off the citation, and I'm like, oh crap. I knew she was going to be looking at me. So I turned over and I saw her, and I mean, I knew exactly what she was thinking. Like, oh my God, you're doing what you did, what, and, uh, I think most of us, we don't tell our family because, for me personally, I didn't want my mom to worry. I told her from the get-go, I'm like, if anything ever happens to me, it was my choice. This is what I wanted to do. And, if something were to happen, just want to let you guys know that this was my decision. And, but yeah, I think that was the very first time that she realized exactly what the job entailed.
Well, you're right. Y'all don't talk. I mean, every controller and probably most of the other guys, like the SF guys, and man, you definitely don't brag and you don't talk much about it. Got to pry it out of you. What about this? So the battle was September 24th, 2009. For it says 16 hours, I think, and it also says like 32 enemy insurgents killed in action. Will you just describe what happened there, Ish, and what was your role in it?
So prior to that, I was kind of on alert. I was recalled into the squadron, and they let me know that something had happened, obviously something catastrophic. And Zach Reiner, Air Force Cross recipient, I think he'd received it at that point. He was in the vehicle along with uh, 2 or 3 other Green Berets, and they all got ejected minus the driver. And unfortunately, Captain Tinsley took the brunt of it. His tire was the side that hit the improvised explosive device, and he was instantly killed. So Zach finished out his time, and I ended up deploying as normal, to the fire-based Cobra. I had no idea exactly the extent of how bad that place is, but I get there and we're doing presence patrols, and we go to the most outer edge of our white space. We have a checkpoint up on the hill, and we have to cross a stream to get to the other side of the hill where Captain Tinsley's truck still remained. And we talked about going over there and blowing the truck up, trying to get bombs on the truck. And at the time, just to get rid of it, just it's more of a trophy, and it's a reminder of that the Taliban won that day, and so we wanted to get rid of it, and they wouldn't let us blow it up using bombs or aircraft or anything like that. So after a few presence patrols to kind of get myself oriented to the area, we decided to go up there and use explosives ourselves to get rid of it. So immediately after we crossed the river, we had one of the locals, elderly man, comes up and he's like, "Hey, you guys don't want to go out there? They've placed IEDs all over the place." So we're ready for them. We have mine detectors. We have dogs that can detect the bombs or sniff them out. And as we're heading up the hill, we're slowed down, and I mean we found 10 or 11 right off the get go. And our EOD tech, he can only work so fast because he's got to be really careful. So we started marking them as we were going. Well, we're not moving very fast, so half the team decided to uh, recon and make sure that the houses behind us are empty. All the houses were empty there, and we continued forward. So,
Hey,
my
Ish, sorry. So is this a mission like where you're going to be gone a few days and you're going to sleep out away from the base, or is it out and back same day plan?
no, it's technically out and back the same day,
Okay.
where we can drive back. So it was supposed to be an out and back. And we left pretty early in the morning. As soon as we wake up, have breakfast, we leave. Um, but yeah, we're finding IEDs, and I decided to end up going forward with our Charlie, our demolitions guy, and the mine detecting dog and my interpreter. So, I get a call on the radio, and it's my team leader, the captain's calling me, wondering where I was. And that's what kind of really saved our lives, at least my life. The other guys were right there with me, and we're discussing, yeah, I'm fine. Let's keep moving. And as soon as we turn around, they remote controlled initiated a detonation. And I mean, just a massive IED. And I was a little shell shocked at first. I saw the explosion come out of the ground, and I mean, it's surreal. It was, I saw the explosion, the fire, the soot, the rocks. I mean, just billowing out of the earth. And the first thought was, man, I'm dead. I had no, uh, um, I didn't think I was going to survive it. And then once I realized I'm okay, ironically enough, I didn't have a scratch on me. Um, I was looking for my teammates, and at this point, my teammates had already run, and they found a small berm, and they were shooting back, over the berm. Um, but there was no more room. I mean, they were hunched in there pretty tight. So once I came to my senses, I'm looking forward,
Are
and
you
I
on the
hear
ground or are you standing at this point?
I'm
You're
um,
standing?
I'm still standing at
Okay.
this point, and you know I hear all these little cracks up around me, um, and it was actually bullets being fired at me. Initially, I thought it was, you know, part of the fragments of and rocks of the IED coming back down to earth. And I look across the way, and there's, some of the Taliban popping up, shooting machine guns from the hip, which is probably our only saving grace, is that they weren't, accurate enough to hit because they were shooting from the hip. And so I'm looking around for cover, and we're up on top of a hill, and it's a flat hill, and there's literally no cover. And finally, in the direction that they're firing at us, I see a small, I mean, it's a very small berm. And I was like, well, I either stay here and take my chances with, the bullets, or I take my chances with an IED. So, I mean, I was just running as fast as I could. Again, everything is still in slow motion.
Had you
And
been talking to any aircraft at this point?
no, not at that point. At that point, it was just my initial, I got to get to cover. I got to move to cover, and I got to start getting aircraft, or artillery. Artillery was the most readily available at that time, and so I'm running across this minefield, hoping if I step on something, it either takes out my leg or it's quick, you know. Um, and then I see this hail of bullets coming at me, kind of like Neo in the Matrix, where he puts his hand up and he stops. It's exactly what I saw, and I'm like, I'm about to get hit. So I slung my weapon to my left side, and I jumped into the berm, and I landed with both my arms in that berm, and I immediately felt the snap on my right hand and the burning. And then I didn't realize at the time, but my left hand was also pretty messed up. And then that's when, when I hit the ground, my radio kind of switched channels. So I'm sitting there trying to get artillery online, making comms with the truck. And then, and in the meantime, I'm also listening to my guys saying that they're running out of ammo. And while I'm taking pop shots, I start conserving my ammo, and I'm, using a couple rounds to, I'm trying to hit them, but, I don't know if I hit any of them at that time, but, they were going down, and then others would pop up. So I'm trying to conserve ammo. So I finally looked down at my radio, and I don't know how much time has elapsed. It seemed like an eternity. But I looked down at my radio, and I realized that I was on the wrong channel. So I finally made comms with the truck, and I'm like, "Hey, we're pinned down up in this hill, and we're running out of ammo." And next thing I know, one of my buddies, Ivan, is driving his quad, and I'm like, "Man, he's gonna hit an IED." And I try to direct him as best as possible. He almost ran me over. I'm laying in the prone, and he jumps off his gun, or off his quad, the ATV, and he has a 240 machine gun mounted to the front, and he jumps off and he's like, "Hey, Ish, where they at?" I point, and he's like, "All right." He just starts laying down fire, and so now I'm focused on calling in artillery and getting in some air assets. And Josh was the other guy that ended up the second ATV going to support the guys that were pretty much out of ammo at this point, and I directed him over to them. He does the same thing, and he starts laying down firepower. And I was down to my last mag and a half. I had a full mag in my chest rig, and then my last magazine, half mag in my rifle. So then we start calling in artillery, and we're suppressing the enemy. And then I got some rotary wing assets in there, and we're hunting these guys down in the trenches. So they're doing the shooting and moving, and then finally I get A10s, and the helos talk to the A10s on exactly where these guys are at, and we found that there was a cave that they were all hunkered down in, and I called in a bomb from the A10s, and it put 2 500-pounders down, and it collapsed the entire cave. And they're not very deep, in that area. And I estimated there were probably more than 32 killed just from the fighting, but 32 was the number that we confirmed for sure in that cave. But and all this is happening in it feels like a very short time. So me and the guys were pinned down on top of that hill for about 15 to 20 minutes before we got reinforcements. The guys are trying to fight their way past these minefields. They're moving nice and slow. We don't want another vehicle down. But once we got the momentum, it was on. We ended up chasing them way past the edge of our white space. And we even had them resupply us with ammunition. And then sometime
How
later,
they do that?
It was a C-130. So basically the tail end, it comes up and then it goes straight up into the air, and they just release that, the pallets of ammo exactly where you want it. So we're chasing these things down. It's incredible, what they do. But yeah, then, we were fighting throughout the night. And then the next morning is when we got the resupply. cleared the village, found a booby trap in the building and everything that luckily for us didn't go off. But yeah, 16 hours condensed into this, it almost doesn't seem real.
So I got to ask something. Um, this is maybe just the realist, I guess, in me, but 16 hours. I mean, at some point you got to pee, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, you pee where you can. Honestly, I've had to pee before during gunfights. I think because of the adrenaline, and not to get too graphic, but I don't recall a time where I've had to poop during gunfights.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the body preserving itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you take cover, pop a couple rounds down, and then whip it out and pee where you're at.
Okay. I've wondered that actually, because sometimes there's occasions when the body is in control.
Oh yeah.
So what about the effects of the IED ish, and how long? Because you had to, I mean, you had to call in accurate airstrikes after that.
Yeah, the initial IED really messed up my insides. I don't, it's a really weird feeling with the overpressure on the body, and I was actually pooping blood for about a week, and the medic was going to send me back to Kandahar to get checked out, and I was like, no, man, because I was afraid that if I left, I wasn't coming back. So, we made a deal. I'm like, listen, man, if it doesn't stop by the end of the week, I'll definitely go. Luckily, it stopped for me. And so the concussive, the overpressure of the bomb is, does crazy things to the body. And then I ended up breaking both my arms, during that gunfight. And I had no idea how bad they were, really. I actually redeployed my next deployment with my arm's still pretty messed up, but
And you've
yeah,
had surgery since.
I've had one surgery on my right hand, and I've had 4 surgeries on my left to kind of fix it.
Well, you killed lots of terrorists with bombs. Did you kill any with your personal weapon that time? In that,
Yeah, I actually ended up getting a few with my personal weapon. Um, one guy up on the hill, he thought he couldn't be reached, and as precisely as I could, I'm kind of arcing the bullets at this, at this point, but I just see his head whip back, and he falls. And later on, one of our informants in town said, "Yeah, that the guy had actually died because I shot him in the face." But he was just blatantly standing out there, thinking we couldn't reach him. And then I got a couple of the 240 machine gun kills as well. So the little combination of everything, really.
yeah. Okay. What else about that battle? What stands out? Because it's it's crazy, and y'all didn't. Nobody. How many got injured that battle? Because nobody got killed, right?
Yeah, nobody got killed. No one else got injured. You know, I mean, luckily, no one else was injured. But on the way back, we did have a machine gun go off in one of the trucks, and as soon as it went off, it let out a 2-round burst, and I was like, "Well, here we go again." And it ended up shooting one of the Afghans in the back. So they're not very careful with their weapons, or they don't have a lot of weapon discipline. So guy accidentally discharged his weapon, and it was weird because this is a PKM. There's a 7.62 machine gun, and point blank, and the rounds just stuck in his back. And I the only reason we realized this because he was complaining about his back hurting, and I told him to turn around and pull his shirt up, and there they are, 2 rounds lodged in his scapula, point blank, very little blood. The scream that guy did after he found out that he'd been shot was ridiculous. Like, bro, calm down.
He didn't scream before, and
No.
not until he knew he got shot.
Yeah.
Well, they used to talk about their discipline and how like they were shooting at you from the hip. I mean, that one of those videos of Mark, and he's trying to tell him to aim, and point and shoot. Is that so? That sounds like that's typical then.
Oh, it's very typical. What they'll do is they'll just shoot over the top, or they'll just spray, and they're really not effective whatsoever. Which is, I even though we train them to shoot accurately, they're just, it's kind of like cowboys. They're more worried about, which rightfully so, getting killed and whatnot, but it's almost to the point to where it's really ineffective. It's like, don't even shoot at all. That's not all of them. A very small percentage of them can actually use their weapon the way that they're supposed to.
So in 2009, you were pretty seasoned-ish. Does that now, just correct me here where I'm wrong, but I'm gonna go with this as a combat controller, and you and I have talked about this before, but you don't really have your own teams that you deploy with. You attach to other teams all the time, and so you're constantly, whenever you go to a new team, you've got new personalities and new chemistry to I guess people to get along with, and they need to trust you because you're really the one calling in the bombs. Did you already have their trust at this point, or is this kind of what really made them know you were legit?
We do deploy onesies and twosies, and very rarely are there two guys in the same fire base. And it just so happened that I was in the same fire base with another controller. But the beginning of 9/11, I think, was one of the hardest because we did have to prove ourselves. Here we are, these Air Force guys, getting attached to all these other special forces, and again, everybody just thinks Air Force. But our people have our personalities. We blend right in. We get along great with the rest of the teams. Every now and then there's issues, but it's not very common. So we assimilate really well with the teams. We have similar training. We bring our everything air to ground, bombs on target, resupplies, air landing, helo landing, all kinds of stuff to the fight. So we're a force multiplier, so we can shoot, move, and communicate as well as do our job. And after 9/11, a lot of the teams kind of understood that, and they realized that, and we formed a really great working relationship with them. So yeah, you're the new guy, but at the same time, as long as you fit well, your personality is good, and you pull your part, do your part of the job, and the transition is almost seamless. Plus, the guys that are already there, Meal Train was there, and another controller named Scott was there. So I've worked with them over the years, and we always ask each other, hey, how's this guy? So they already have a warm fuzzy before I get there. When the next guy comes in, it's kind of the same thing. We know our capabilities, and we know the capabilities of the guys coming in after us.
Well, in May of, I think it was May of 2010-ish, there at the end of your deployment at that time, you trained Mark. Will you share with us, because I don't remember talking about this with you, what did you think when you found out Mark was coming? Because you didn't know him, he was new, it was his first deployment, and then how did you prepare him for that area?
Yeah, I've had a hand in deciding where guys go, and we send guys based on maturity, experience, their knowledge level, all sorts of factors that go into actually deciding where we put guys. And when I started talking to the guys in the rear back stateside about who's going to replace me, they talked about Mark, and I was like, okay, who? I didn't know Mark at the time, and I was like, who is this guy? He's like, well, he's brand new. He's straight out of his training for his JTAC training. And I was like, no, do not send him here. I need somebody that's more experienced. Somebody who's seasoned, and the guys that were making the decision, I trust. And they assured me that, they're like, hey, Mark is not a young guy. He's more mature. The guy is ridiculously smart. he picked up his rating right away, and and they're like, and he's ready, like he's ready to get at it. And I was like, well, okay, I trust your guys' judgment, because we've made decisions like that together before. And it's like, all right. So I started talking to Mark when he found out he was coming or shortly after that. And I had him pull up imagery maps of the surrounding area, and I gave him a circle, encompassed what he needed to know. I'm like, I need you to remember all these terrains like the back of your hand. I'm like, you study them. And I would send him, choke points, areas where historically, we get ambushed, areas where we've had firefights, because they use the same areas over and over. Taught him about, easy egress points for them, which is most likely where they're going to attack us, because they need to run and get out of there, pretty quick. So by the time he got to me, he already knew the area. And, all I had to do was point out, like, okay, this is this area, this is that area. And he was already familiar. But yeah, when he came into country, I think it was going to be about 2 to 3 weeks before we could get him out into the fire base. And it's hard. Cobra is one of those places where it is extremely hard to get resupplied. It is extremely hard to find helicopters to come in. So Mark ended up hitching a ride on a medevac flight. So, and I didn't expect him that early until I got a call from the stock and said, hey, Mark's on his way. I'm like, what? I thought you guys said like 2 to 3 weeks. And here comes Mark. I mean, he's tall. I'm 5'8", and Mark is pretty dang tall. And, I see him walking out of the bird, and, I go to meet him, and I'm like, okay, hey, now we know each other. And I mean, immediately off the get-go, Mark, like, his presence alone, like, he had a really commanding presence, and, real polite, real respectful, and he just wanted to get to work.
Well, what did you do? I mean, because I remember he did send us some pictures. I'm sure it was while you were still there, and it was like he was riding a four-wheeler, and he had his multicam pants on, but he had this crimson, Alabama bright shirt on, and we're like, Mark, for heaven's sake, please change your shirt right now.
Yeah. Well, we were in relatively safe areas, so him and I would, go out on quads in our white space, so to speak. And I ended up taking him out on a few presence patrols, same way that I was, kind of oriented to the environment. And really no contact with the enemy or anything. And, I actually remember taking him out to our forwardmost edge on the eastern side of our battle space. And, I'm just sitting there behind the rocks, kind of looking over, and Mark is standing up, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm like, you might want to get down, man. I'm like, they're watching us, and so all of a sudden, like, you hear over the, the walkie-talkies that they use, that they're watching me and Mark up on that hill. And I'm like, bro, they're watching us. I'm like, get down.
And y'all got antennas, I'm guessing, right? Big antennas on.
Yeah, those two antennas were magnets. They want to shoot us. They want to kill us. But it's funny. Mark said something to me that day, and he's like, yeah, well, I forget how we got into the conversation, but he's like, I'm here to kill terrorists. And I'm like, God had sent him to kill terrorists. And I just remember thinking, or no, I told him, I'm like, you're definitely going to get the opportunity here, buddy. I'm like, just get down right now.
What about oh yeah, go ahead, Ish. Sorry.
No, but on these presence patrols, I'd teach him, I'd show him the areas, I'd utilize the aircraft, and, hey, I tell the aircraft to go search here, and then I tell Mark, this is why, historically, this is where they'd come up, or, they hide their weapons in certain areas, or this is where I think they're watching us from. And, little by little, I started handing him control of the radio, and he started, controlling the aircraft. And, right towards the end, where, it's finally coming my time where I'm like, man, I've taught you everything that I know here. And I mean, really, really quick learner. And Mark would, I'm sitting beside him, whether on the truck or on the ground. And Mark would keep always looking at me, over his shoulder. And then finally I'm like, hey man, why do you keep looking over your shoulder? He's like, well, I'm waiting to get yelled at, I think I'm screwing up. I'm like, dude, if I'm not saying anything, you're good to go, bro. I'm like, keep going, and but yeah, that's the extent. And I think I was there with him for 2.5 weeks before I finally departed.
So what's the story with your nemesis? Because this is in the book,
Yeah.
but I don't even know. You haven't told me that story since that long ago when I put it in the book, so I don't remember many details.
Yeah, there was a guy that was spotting. He'd call in. He does the same thing we do, call for fires. So they had a few mortar tubes, and this guy would always sit on the side of the hill. And I mean, he was accurate. He was good. That's how Ray Gerard got hurt. They called in enemy mortars on their positions and stuff like that.
Is Ray the one that replaced Mark?
Yes.
Or came shortly after him, maybe?
Yeah, came shortly after. It was him and George were there together.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I was hunting this guy down for the longest time. I would sit out there with binoculars and thermals, and I'm constantly scanning the areas trying to find him. And, before I left, I told Mark, I'm like, your job is to find this dude. And I gave him the general area where, he usually spots from. And Mark ended up finding him. And I got a message one time and it's like, hey, I got him. I'm like, yes, Mark ended up getting him. And that was my nemesis. The entire time I was at Cobra for the 9 months, I was trying to find this guy and kill him. And Mark got.
Well, I think probably your last mission ish, y'all were wrapping it up, coming back to base, and Mark had called for a flyover. He said that, sarcastically, he had been consoling you, for so long because you were no longer the primary JTAC, and he wanted to give you a flyover in your honor. Is that what happened?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, he wasn't being sarcastic. Like, I was really, really bummed I was leaving.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and all the guys, kind of knew it because I did not want to leave. I was even trying to, tell the stock, hey man, I could do a few more months here. I'm like, he needs to be trained up some more, but unfortunately they didn't. And that day, I think it was the day where I finally let him have full control of the all the air assets, and we were actually on our way back home and we were done for the day. And Mark asked the aircraft to do a flyover, kind of like a show of force over our location. And sure enough, the Kiowas that I'd been working with forever, they came in overhead, and it was pretty cool. It was one of the coolest things that really anybody's done for me. It was pretty memorable.
Well, that was a portion of the book that AFSOC asked me to not put in the book because I sent them the manuscript. I sent them all the chapters that involved basically the military, and they came back with some suggestions, and I listened. I followed. I did what they asked me to do on every one of them, but a few, and that was one of them because they said, due to budget constraints and sequestration, we don't want you to put this in here. But I felt like it was important to show his personality and his respect for you to leave that in there, so I did.
Yeah, they can say whatever, but we do show of forces with aircraft all the time, and at the end of the day, those pilots fly low and slow anyway. They're always, I've seen some of those guys actively seek out rounds so that they can identify where, these bad guys are. They're actively trying to get shot at so that, their partner can come in and shoot the bad guys, shoot the enemy wherever they're taking fire from. And, especially finishing up a patrol and they're already on their way back. Like, I don't, to somebody who doesn't know, doesn't know, and yeah, they may complain, but that's something that it's like, hey, we're not abusing, we're not, misusing resources. They're already on the way out and they're already low to begin with, so you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I had a guy one time tell me that it looked careless and I shouldn't have shared a video that I did. It might have been that video, I'm not sure, but that day, but it was one of Mark's helmet camp videos, and I decided to share it. But then I asked you about it. I was like, Ish, really, should I not have shared that? Does it look like Mark didn't care? And you're like, no, screw him. No way. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So I
Yeah.
appreciated that.
I mean, it was on the way out. It was well within our, white space, safe space. So, we don't ask them to do anything that'll jeopardize the aircraft or anything like that. And, the pilots know. I mean, they're not dummies. They know when they do it. And, even in some of the most dangerous places where we're getting shot up or whatever, they'll come down, because they're in the same fight we are. And obviously they want us to survive. We want them to survive. So they're helping us and we're helping them. Some of these folks do amazing things, our air assets, folks who support us, they do incredible things. I mean, I've had guys, punch through the weather. We've got a 500 cloud deck and we're pinned down and we're taking fire. I've had A-10s come below the cloud deck, just to help us get out of those situations and bring our guys back home.
Well, but they have to trust you too, right? I mean, they're not going to do it if they don't trust the guy on the ground talking to them, would they?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Ish, what about I mean, you had more deployments, you got another Silver Star, I think in 2011, right? This one was 2009. 2011, you got one. Which one was the worst, like the worst situation? The first one or the second one?
Well, I don't know. That's kind of hard to, like I enjoyed, as weird as it sounds, we all live for the fight. We live for these types of situations. So it, you know, some of the fighting is worse than others, but as far as the deployments, um, to me, honestly, my last deployment was one of the more fun deployments, if you will, because at Cobra, I'm there for 9 months, but we're fighting is sporadic. There's a lot of fighting, but it doesn't happen all at once. Like 16 hours was the longest firefight that I had at Cobra. But then for my second rotation, it was literally a 21-day gun battle. We were fighting for 21 days. And before that, we fought it out for a week, So, yeah, I can't say that one is harder than the other or one's better than the other. I mean, if anything, I'd say my last deployment was definitely fun. It reminded me of back in the old days when we first started deploying, where we had a hell of a lot of freedom of maneuver versus the restrictions that I had when I was at Cobra. I'd say those are the two biggest differences. Is Cobra, I was a lot more restricted, and when I went out to Kajaki out in Helmand, it was a lot more freedom.
So Cobra, Obama was the president. Did that have something to do with it? And then was there a different president? Was Trump in your last deployment, or is my timing off?
I can't. When did Trump take office? Because it was
16.
No, yeah. So who was president in 09? Was it Obama?
Obama.
I mean, we were really restricted. I mean, we were even restricted in 2011, but for whatever reason, reasons that I can't get to, they let us have a lot more freedom of maneuver.
Okay. What about the toll on your body, Ish? Now, I mean, how many surgeries have you had altogether, and what's your physical body like?
I've had about 12 or 13 surgeries, and I'd say my knees are great, which is the only thing on my body that's great. My left arm is still pretty limited. My right arm's a heck of a lot better. It's not as strong. Uh, I broke my back in 2004, broke my leg in the same rotation as, when I was at Cobra, and then a lot of concussions, traumatic brain injury type, stuff. But, it's hard getting around, and, I feel all the aches and pains. I've done a little bit of different types of treatments that, have actually made my life a little bit easier, but I'm I can't complain too much. I'm blessed. Some of these guys, they lose a hand or whatever, and some guys don't come back. So I feel like I am truly blessed to have walked away with very little or minor injuries, what I call them.
What are some of the things that you've done that have helped you?
I've done stem cell treatment. I've also done a lot of therapy and the surgeries, obviously, and stem cell I think was the biggest thing. It's like the latest and greatest type of stem cell, but it actually decreased the pain in my body as a whole. Um, and then I'm doing a couple other natural type supplements to help me with my sleep um, and then therapy too, to help me with a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with after deployment.
Yeah. Well, man, you're just a selfless American, and my family appreciates you and your friendship to us and to Mark. And yeah, you've sacrificed your body, physically and mentally and emotionally, and we don't even have a clue what it's like. But you got your father of three, and I know you got divorced sometime around, I'm guessing 2011 time frame. Is that
Yeah,
right?
2011 was when I got divorced, and a lot of it was the job. I had changed. I became a completely different person. And I wasn't able to give her what she needed, and um, really, I was going down a path. I was digging a hole for myself every time I deployed, and I'd come home and there's nothing wrong with me. Obviously there was, but I was in denial, and I think that led to uh, ending my marriage.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly happy for you and him and your kids. And would you do it again, Ish, if you could go back to 1997?
Yeah, man. I'll be honest with you. I've seen and worked with some of the most amazing people. I've met some of the most amazing people. Um, I've done what less than 1% of the world will ever do, as far as experiences and different things. And I mean, I've met incredible people throughout uh, this entire process, and no, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Well, you were good at your job, and I know you've had the opportunity to train our guys since, and you're out of that job now. You've got a. I'll put your Instagram link or handle on if you're good with that, because you're definitely entertaining, and many people enjoy your commentary on whatever the subject is, and appreciate you not holding back. Anything in closing, Ish?
No, yeah, man. I just want to let you know how amazing Mark was, man. Um, like I literally, obviously Mark's not with us anymore, but the guy changed my life. He's impacted my life, and I meet people literally from all over the world that you know Mark has touched in some capacity or another. So um, Mark was just an incredible human being.
Well, thank you, and thanks for training him over there, and for being good to us and visiting us. And we're coming up on 12 years now here. By the time this airs, we'll be close to the 29th of September. 12 years. And then, oh, the other thing is Mark is buried wearing your beret.
Yeah.
And that was I know to some people it may sound, dumb, but when we saw Mark's hair in that casket, I was glad that they made the part the right way, because we told him which direction to part his hair, but his haircut looked awful. It was just, and I did not want Mom to see that. I think she probably did see it ish, I think, but you were fortunately, I don't know, did she see his hair?
I think she did see it, and you guys were talking about fixing it, and I suggested, I'm like, hey, we can put his beret on, but you guys didn't have the beret at the time, so it was like, here's mine, use my beret. I mean, the beret means a lot to us, and it's the least thing I could do, and quite honestly, it's an honor. It's an honor to have given it to him.
Yeah. No, that was real special. And because Tim Pinkert from the funeral home had called Joseph and David and me back when Mark's body first got there, he wanted us to see him first before Mom and Terry did, Mom and Dad and Terry. And of course, no body looks good, and it didn't look good, but we knew that it wouldn't look exactly like him. But yeah, the hair, we knew something. We really wanted something done about it. So yeah, appreciate you for that. All right, Ish, anything in closing?
No, sir. Thanks for having me. It's an honor, having you guys as friends. Like, your guys' family is amazing, and I see where Mark got it from. So,
well, man, thank you so much, and we love you and him, and look forward to meeting your kids, and I'll see you in December at the wedding.
brother, we'll see you in December.